fellow citizens, fellow patriots, and even non-citizens, and welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention Weekly News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm the president of the We the People Convention organization. And this podcast and our website and our text messages and our emails and our donations to other conservative groups and individuals are all paid for by the generous donations of our donors who've been supporting us for the last 16 years. And we thank all of you who have donated, past and present, for your support, which has helped us lead the charge in defending and protecting our personal, individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity to defeat the collective, the communist, the socialist movement in our country and in this world, and to keep defending individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Thank you for all of you who donate. Thank you also for all of you who watch this podcast and share the news that we provide, which is really fundamental to your ability to protect your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. If you don't know what the threats are, if you don't know what to do about those threats, then how can you protect yourself? And that's what this podcast is about. We're going to cover what we think is the news that most affects you and us and our nation this week. And then we're going to ask you to take action to help protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And we need you to share this podcast with everyone and to sign up if you don't already get our text messages and emails, because things are happening so quickly. We had a call to action this week that needed your immediate attention. If you haven't signed up yet, go to wethepeopleconvention.org and give us your cell phone number so we can send you texts and your email address so that we can keep you informed and act quickly in an ever-changing world. So let me begin, with the story of the week, as it were, which is the Dem communist sweep of the key elections in 2025, the New York City election, the New Jersey, Virginia, California, Proposition 50, and all that stuff. Democrats knocked down by a Trump tsunami last year, rode a blue wave back to relevance Tuesday night, an off-cycle election day, as voters hit the polls in a few states, and the down and out Democrat Party notched win after win and showed signs of life heading into next year's midterms. As President Donald Trump's maximalist revenge tour of a second term ran headlong into its first electoral pushback, this is by Politico, by the way, as voters in critical off-year races registered staunch opposition to him. Much ado about not so much. In the blue states of California, New Jersey, and Virginia, Newsom, Sherrill, and Spanberg effectively used Trump as a foil for their electoral efforts. Trump wasn't on the ballot Tuesday. In fact, he quickly trotted out on Truth Social to rationalize the wake of setbacks of his party. I'm not so sure. Yet, yes, he did not campaign forcibly for Republicans, distancing himself from off-year elections historically unkind to the party in the White House, let alone when controlling all major levels of power amid a historic government shutdown. But voters used a few races to send him a message, according to exit polls, which showed that more than half of the people who voted said it was an anti-Trump vote. Now, it's an anti-Trump vote, but you're in Virginia, New Jersey, New York City. It's a local election. So that just shows you Trump derangement syndrome. And it just shows you that this was not a serious vote on policy, right? It wasn't a serious vote on policy. And so, what happened on Tuesday? Well, it's not a surprise that blue states, Virginia, New Jersey, and then New York City and California voted blue. What a shocker, right? But there were still things that we need to take note of. I said on this story, it said, wake up call for Republicans as new constituents vote for Dems. Okay. And so what do I mean by that? In Virginia, for instance, the turnout by MAGA was pathetic. Like 30% of MAGA didn't vote. And that's the big question for next year, for 2026. will MAGA come out to vote if Trump's not on the ballot? He's not going to be on the ballot next year directly. I'll talk about that in a second. But we just didn't turn out. And I go back to what I've been telling you for the last 3 weeks. We're in a civil war. The radical left has realized they can't win elections. Now, you're saying, Tom, they just won these elections. Yeah, I mean national elections for control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. They're seeing that go bye-bye as all the money's being taken away from them that they were stealing from you and I to fund their Antifas and their NGOs that got illegals to vote and their mail-in ballot operations and all the other criminal activities. That's drying up, and we'll talk more about this in the podcast. They're desperate, and they've shut down the government, and they're going to keep it shut down unless we take action, because they know they've got to stop Trump right now, or they're done. I mean, I don't mean done like they can't win in 2026 or 2028. I mean the Democratic, Communist, Marxist, whatever you want to call it, party will cease to exist as a serious political party in the United States. And that's what we're on the brink of. But what does that mean? Like a trapped rat, they're going to fight harder than ever. And we have to fight harder than ever to kill the rat, the disease, the cancer that has been infecting our political structure since, at least, the beginning of the 1920s, when the commies and Woodrow Wilson, all these people decided that a republic was not what we wanted. We want, to have communist rule. So the fight is on, and we've got to win it. Couple things. Let me just, throw a couple things out there. Mandami, I've been calling him Commie Mandami. Glenn Beck had an interesting story this week where he talked about how in Iran, when the U.S. CIA had installed the Shah as a strongman to govern Iran, and the communists and the Muslims got together to overthrow the Shah, they were partners. They were just like this. Our cause is just, and we're going to get rid of the tyrannical Shah. But then when they did and brought in the Ayatollah, the Islamists killed all the communists. Literally, jailed them, murdered thousands of them. That's what New York's about. Mandami is not Kami Mandami. He's Muslim Mandami. He's going to work to bring in, all these illegals, Muslims, and make New York City London. And we're going to have to stop that. And we're going to see, how effective President Trump can be in stopping that. But that's going to be the goals. He's not going to be a commie. He's an Islamist. In our fight, fundamentally, yes, we have to beat the commies. We got to beat the Islamists as well. And Glenn Beck said this, and I kind of agree with him. He said, if I'm going to bet on who's going to win between the commies and the Islamists, I'm going to pick the Islamists because they believe it. They're more committed to their cause. And you can see videos all over YouTube saying, and again, we're coming for you. We're going to come into your country. We're going to have lots of babies. We're going to take all your welfare. We're going to use your free speech against you. We're going to run for office. We're going to win, and we're going to overthrow you. It's happening in Europe right now. It's going to happen here if we don't wise up, if we don't step up, if we don't fight like we have to fight. So, the bottom line is that these losses were not unpredictable, but they were a message to all of us that we've got to win this fight. And they've now, the whole thing was, well, after the election, the Democrats don't have any more reason to hold out, so they're going to come to the table to open the government. And I told you, when they don't care about the unions, when they don't care about the 42 million SNAP people, half of which are illegals that they put on illegally in California and New York, okay? When they don't care about those people, they don't care about anything but power. And so they ain't going to open the government, folks. we're going to have to open the government. And we're going to have to remember what, and I'll just the last thing I'll say about the elections. And Trump, was right on it. The elections happen on Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, he's speaking to Republican senators and he's talking economics. He's talking kitchen table issues. He's talking food prices, gas prices, what we're doing for the average person. Because what the quote unquote Republicans in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia didn't do was they didn't talk about that. And next year, it's all about the economy, stupid. It's all about it. And we're going to have to take action. And the reason they're keeping the government shut down is so that we don't take action to improve people's lives so they won't vote for us in 2026. That's the battle. That's the fight. And we've met the enemy, and it's the Republican Party. That's who the problem is. As we saw in Virginia, Youngkin he's a rhino. And the candidates they put up and the way they ran showed they don't want anything to do with Donald Trump. And they lost. Better wise up, folks. Republicans, you better wise up because it's all going to change next year if you don't wise up. And seriously, a lot of Republicans, quote unquote Republicans, rhinos, don't want Donald Trump. They want to see Donald Trump impeached. They do. Republicans do. They love the status quo because they made lots and lots of money. Okay? They don't like having to listen to you. They don't like your phone calls and things. But we're fighting for the American people. We're fighting for the world. Freedom, liberty, prosperity. They're just fighting for money, for greed, for control, for power. That's the fight we're all in. Okay? So, while, the whole issue of the elections was the news of the week, it really was not the news of the week. The news of the week was this. President Trump demands that the Senate end the filibuster and open the government. President Donald Trump ramped up his pressure campaign to end the filibuster on Wednesday morning, right after the election, telling Republican senators in the White House, meaning that it is very important for the GOP to terminate the filibuster and reopen the government. In the past week, Trump has called for the end of the filibuster multiple times as Democrats continue to block GOP efforts to pass a short-term spending bill to end the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. Trump took another step in his call for the end of filibuster in Wednesday's meeting, making his plea directly to Republican senators. Trump suggested that they should end the filibuster as soon as this afternoon and then open the government. And also, when polls showed that more than 50% said they voted in those elections as a vote against Trump, an FU to Trump, the polls also showed that many of the people who voted, like 40%, was because of the shutdown that the Democrats caused, okay? The Democrats caused that, but they wanted to blame the Republicans. And there was a study, a little study here. This is from, let's see here. This is from, this is a study. TV news spends shutdown playing defense for Democrats. For the past month, the big three broadcast networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, have hammered both congressional Republicans and President Trump with a wall of negative shutdown coverage while largely shielding the Democrats for blame for the now historic gridlock. MRC, which is the group Newsbusters that tracks media analysis, examined every evening newscast on ABC, CBS, NBC between October 1st and October 31st across 67 reports and news briefs which discussed the government shutdown. 87% of the coverage favored Democrats. Analysts found 83 evaluated statements in which anchors or reporters were critical of Republicans, but just 12 criticized Democrats. Right? There you go. Now, you're not watching that. I'm not watching that. The polls don't show that. But the people who voted in Virginia, New Jersey, and New York, they watch those stations. That's all they heard. The government shut down. Here's a breakdown. Broadcast shutdown coverage heavily favored Democrats over Republicans, 87 to 13%. Only 12 reports, less than 1/5, even mentioned that Senate Democrats had refused to vote for a clean continuing resolution. Not a single report mentioned that Democrats voted back in March to end the same Obamacare subsidies which they were now demanding. Do you see how it works? Do you see how it's propaganda? Well, that's not going to work in a general election nationally, because we will expose that. But you and I don't have the resources in Virginia, New Jersey, and New York to carry that message to the idiots who voted for their own demise. Do you understand? But this is important for you to understand that this is the campaign and the radical Marxist left, whose goal is to destroy the United States of America right now, is not going to open the government. And President Trump, he spelled it out. Here's the video.
Things that we passed if we terminated the filibuster. Voter ID, no mail-in voting, no cash bail, no men and women's sports, no welfare for illegals. You could go on and on. This is 2 pages of things we'd do if you did that. Without it, I don't know that you passed anything, because you can't deal with them. They're really irrational. They really are. But
yeah, they're not irrational. They're committed to the overthrow of the United States, and they're committed to not allowing any more success from Donald Trump and MAGA. That's what they're committed to, right? And so he's 1,000% right. But we're hearing Thune and Johnson and the rhinos saying, we don't want to get rid of the filibuster. That just would be terrible when they get back in power. Folks, the whole point is for them never to get back in power. That's the whole point, Republican rhinos. That's the whole point. And so I asked you on that email, or excuse me, on that article on the We the People Convention website, I said, call your senators today and demand that they overthrow the filibuster. Because many of you don't remember. You do not remember. And now I'm going to remind you. In Trump 1.0, they forced Trump, they had a government shutdown because Trump would not approve the budget until Paul Ryan and the other McConnell and the rhinos put in the tax cuts for the middle class, for the working people, okay, the 2017 tax cut. After that, how much legislation did the Republicans pass, even though we had the House and the Senate for 2 years? Passed that much. 0. You know what we're on course to do right now? 0. Oh, the filibuster. Oh, the Republicans. If we don't get rid of the filibuster and get rid of mail-in ballots, put voter ID, fix the immigration for real with all the loopholes closed, get rid of all the people who are on SNAP who have no right to be on SNAP, close all those loopholes. If we don't do those things, then it's all executive orders. It's all executive orders. And it won't last. So this is why President Trump is going all in. This is why you and I have to go all in. This is not optional. This is a must. This is your call to action right now. You need to spend all next week, every day, calling your senators, demanding they get rid of the filibuster. It's just that simple. And to show you how unserious things are, I mean, we starting to get to the point where we're not paying government employees, we're not paying the SNAP benefits. I'll talk about that in a second. And now we have an air traffic controller crisis because there were not enough air traffic controllers before, and now there's even less because they're not getting paid. They're calling in sick. Over 1,000 flights canceled as Democrat shutdown continues. Now, again, the lamestream propaganda, Democratic propaganda machine, they're not saying that they're closed because the Democrats closed the government. They're just saying, Donald Trump came and keep the airlines going, right? So what does this mean? It's a big impact. Airports across the United States are grinding to a halt as the delays mount, with over 1,000 flights canceled this morning. The Federal Aviation Administration issued an unprecedented order to scale back flights nationwide, citing the ongoing Democrat government shutdown, which now is the longest in history. The FAA reductions began at 4% today and are set to increase to 10% by this coming Friday. This cutback affects all commercial air carriers and is impacting 40 airports nationwide, including major hubs such as Atlanta, Dallas, Denver, Los Angeles, Charlotte, New York, Houston, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. Okay? So I think this is Trump trying to force them to open the government, but it's not working. It's not working. And so what happens on Friday? Chuck Schumer makes an insanely stupid, just an ignorant attempt to open the government to show what they're doing. And Senator Kennedy, okay, who is literally a quote machine and one of the funniest guys in Congress, puts it like this to Fox News. Here it is.
What is your response to Chuck Schumer's proposal here to keep those ACA benefits going for another year? Bipartisan committee to work on those and reopen the government with a clean CR?
God, please give me patience, because if you give me strength, I'm going to need bail money. What Senator Schumer is suggesting is that we do the dumbest thing possible that won't work. Stupid should hurt more. Senator Schumer says we should just extend the status quo for a year. What does that mean? That means that we would have to take $35 billion of taxpayer money and give it directly to the health insurance companies without any commitment of lowering premiums. How is that going to reduce health care costs? How's that going to reduce premiums? The health care companies are going to take $35 billion from the taxpayers and put it into their pockets. I mean, duh. I don't know what Senator Schumer is thinking. Earth to Chuck. I mean, earth to Chuck. Am I going to vote for this? The short answer is no. The long answer is hell no. I think we're just going to have to get used to the fact that we've been in a shutdown. We're going to be in a shutdown for a while. I voted 14 times to lift the shutdown. The Democrats and Senator Rand Paul have voted 14 times to keep the government shut down. We're just going to be here for a while.
Yeah, well, that's the point. You can't be there for a while because we're burning daylight, as Steve Bannon likes to say. The whole goal is to run out the damn clock. All right? Yeah. Earth to Chuck Schumer? How about Earth to Senator Kennedy? How about Earth to John Thune? How about Earth to Republicans all over the nation who just are being fools? They're being fooled. They're being played. The goal is to burn daylight. Every day that passes that they aren't in session, they aren't doing things to do what you and I voted for, to implement the Make America Great Again agenda, is a win for the left. That's the whole point. So you've got to overturn the filibuster. And then you've got to vote on things like no mail-in ballots, changing the immigration laws, fixing all the things that they're used to handicap the American people and enrich themselves. If we get rid of why the Republicans don't want to get rid of the filibuster? Because they'd have to do things. They'd actually have to vote. They don't want to do that. They want the excuse, baby. We can't accept it. I'm telling all of you, I'm asking all of you, this is the next hill we must die on. President Trump is damn right. And he's got 2 pages of things that we would do immediately after we got over the filibuster. Oh, baby. You think that Russ Vought and Project 2025 and those guys don't have the legislation behind that? Let's go, baby. Let's make 2026 the greatest year of conservative legislation in the history of the United States. It only happens one way. We have to overturn the filibuster. And you and I are going to have to make that happen. And we will. I have no doubt about this. We're going to win this fight because we have to. We have to. Okay? And so in the middle of all this, they're saying, Donald Trump's a king. He's a king, right? No king's rally. He just does stuff without the law. And then you get this. Trump administration must fully fund food stamps for November by Friday. By Friday, this federal woman judge said. The Trump administration must pay the approximately $9 billion to fully fund food stamps for November, a federal judge ruled on November 6th. The U.S. Department of Agriculture must pay states the money by November 7th to distribute to the approximately 42 million Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, food stamp participants, according to an oral order from Judge John McConnell Jr. of the U.S. District Court of Rhode Island. And then there was another woman judge, that said the same thing. Well, don't you love this? Don't you love this? Well, you're a king. But then Trump says we don't have legal authority because Congress has to allocate these funds, and you, the Democrats, shut down the government. And now who's king? A measly, stinking federal judge thinks they're king. Think they can just order it. Oh, the laws don't matter, do they? No, they don't matter to them. So what happened on Friday? What a surprise. Supreme Court temporarily halts order requiring government to fully fund SNAP. A federal district judge previously ordered full funding. The U.S. Supreme Court issued a late-night order on November 7th, temporarily pausing the lower court's order requiring the federal government to fully fund it until they can go through the court process. They're playing both sides. They're trying to force Trump to act like a king so they can claim he's a dictator, right? And then when he doesn't act like a dictator, they're trying to make him do things that he can't do. It's insane, but they get away with it because you don't explain it enough to people around you who don't get it, okay? That don't get it. So the bottom line is the Democrats are in such disarray. They're looking for Trump, the dictator, to take action because their people are hurting. But they're not going to get that action because it's stupid and Trump's not going to do stupid stuff. Let's see here. Recall the promises of doom and utter dismay had heard in 2024. The bulk of the last year's election, and by the way, this is 1 year anniversary of the greatest victory in American political history that you and I delivered for Donald Trump a year ago. And I hope many of you are remembering that. And I hope many of you are realizing how much we've accomplished and how much Donald Trump has accomplished. But back then, they were saying, oh my gosh, Trump would deliver a totalitarian state. He would bring death to the democracy. He would destroy the economy. He would be the end of everything. Okay? As they have now imposed the longest shutdown in the nation's history, one of the problems is that November 1 saw the end of funding for SNAP food benefits, something affecting the core constituents of the Democrats. Amazingly, these same Democrats have repeatedly vowed a GOP-crafted bill, voted down the GOP-crafted bill to supply and emergency funding. So we've said, okay, the government shut down. Let's just vote to fund SNAP then. These are mostly blue state constituents. And they won't even do that because I've told you why. Because they're not interested in helping anyone but themselves. The goal is to overthrow the nation, to create chaos. To save face from leveraging the hurt they are imposing on their own voting base, the Dems are desperately trying to spin this onto Trump. Schumer declared that President Trump has the power to go forward and force this program, as well as WIC benefits to be funded. Seriously, Schumer is declaring that the president should override the spending responsibility that Congress wields. The head of the Democratic Senate is saying Trump should override Congress. They want the man they call a dictator to behave in the fashion they have screamed he will enforce on the country. There you have it. There's the playbook. There's the plan. So when I'm saying these things to you, there's the receipts. There's the evidence. Our electoral system, our political system, our government, our courts is broken. It's broken. There's nobody that's following any of the law. Congress is not doing the appropriations. They're accusing the president of acting unilaterally. The courts are interfering on everything the president does. There's no separation of powers. The courts are corrupt. The DOJ, as we're going to see next, has been corrupt and is corrupt. So what does that mean? That means we've got to play by our rules. We've got to set different rules. We've got to attack them where they don't think we will attack them. We've got to get rid of the frickin' filibuster and then drive all of our policies into law. That's what we have to do to defeat these people. If we don't, we're going to be in trouble. And Steve Bannon said this week, he said, if we lose in 26 and 2028, he said, he will be in prison. I will be in prison. Many of you will be in prison. They're not kidding around, kids. They're totalitarians. Mandami is a Muslim. What do they want? You do as I say or off with your head. There's no arguing with these people. There's no negotiating with these people. You must defeat these people. I'm confident we will. We just need to act on what we know. And that's what we're going to do. Right? That's what you and I are going to do this week. We're going to act. We're going to push to get the filibuster overturned. And then we're going to push the Republicans who still have to listen to us because their primaries haven't come yet. And before next year's election, when they want to be reelected, yeah, we still have leverage, folks. Let's use it. Okay, so I said, more evidence that our government is corrupt. The FBI, the DOJ was corrupt. Behind the scenes, while all this other stuff is going on, there is a hell of an effort by Kash Patel, by Pam Bondi, by Dan Bongino, by all these other people, by Dr. Janine, by all these people that we know where the bodies are buried, to go and keep litigating, keep going. So this week, just the news, and I get, John Solomon is being fed documents, just like the deep state feeds documents to the deep state, to New York Times and Washington Post. Now John Solomon at Just the News is their source, but it's important because this is what they're coming out with. Comey expected to work with President-elect Clinton. New top aide was talking to media. New emails disclosed. This was amazing what John Solomon produced this week. They actually found, and I am astonished at the arrogance of the deep staters. They just simply thought that Trump could never win. They simply thought that they could just make sure he went to prison because they didn't destroy the evidence. And now the evidence is coming out and it's damning. John Solomon literally had handwritten notes from Comey just incriminating himself. Federal prosecutors revealed on Monday they have unearthed a trove of personal emails showing then FBI Director James Comey openly talked in the days before the 2016 election that he expected to be working soon for President-elect Hillary Clinton and was being kept apprised by top FBI aide on efforts to anonymously provide information to the news media. Well done, my friend. Who knew this would be so much fun, Comey wrote in early November 2016 email after then FBI Special Government employee Dan Richmond briefed the FBI director on Richmond's efforts to provide information and guidance to the New York Times on an article involving Clinton's email scandal. The email was referenced in a bombshell court filing by acting attorney Lindsay Halligan and her deputy Tyler Lemons. God bless you. God bless attorney Lindsay Halligan and Tyler Lemons, in which the government rejected Comey's argument that he's being maliciously prosecuted for misleading Congress about actions he took as FBI director. Hilligan cited and attached to the filing numerous emails in which Comey was clearly aware that Richmond was working to provide information anonymously to news outlets about the Clinton email case, and that he expected those outreach efforts would end with Clinton defeating Donald Trump in the November 2016 election. Quote from Comey, "Someday they will figure it out. And as individual one and individual two point out, my decision will be one a President-elect Clinton will be very grateful for, although that wasn't why I did it," Comey wrote Richmond in one such email. Right? Halligan's filing said the email showed Comey was aware of and encouraged Richmond's contacts with the immediate contrary to his claims to Congress. That is the perjury charge. Consistent with the above described correspondence, Richmond's corresponded extensively with members of the media regarding or on behalf of the defendant, meaning Comey, including in an anonymous capacity, the DOJ court filing argued, which you can read in the article, which will be linked on our podcast page this week. So, yeah, this is moving forward. Again, and I'll talk next a little bit later here about the uncertainty of the court system, okay? But then this news broke last night, and I think it's really important. It's really a big step in the right direction. Breaking: Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, John Brennan subpoenaed by federal grand jury in Russiagate probe. Okay. The Democrats, Schumer, Shutdown, and their continuing refusal to fund the government is the only big story coming out of Washington, D.C. Friday evening, Fox News Digital is reporting that the federal grand jury out of the Southern District of Florida has served subpoenas on notorious former FBI agent Peter Strzok, his one-time lover, former FBI lawyer Lisa Page. A total of up to 30 subpoenas are expected to be handed down on numerous individuals involved with a fake Russia collusion investigation into Donald Trump and the Crossfire Hurricane. Meanwhile, CIA Director John Brennan was also served, as we reported earlier on Friday. The important thing is the grand jury issued the subpoenas is out of the Southern District of Florida, not out of D.C. U.S. Attorney for the U.S. Southern District of Florida, Jason Redding Quonos, is supervising the probe. Fox News Digital first reported in July that Brennan and former FBI Director Comey were under investigation. Now they've been subpoenaed. It's in Florida, folks. Really, really important. Really important. 'Cause I don't know. I mean, the emails against Comey are so damning. It's unbelievable to me that a grand jury, a federal grand jury, would not convict on that. But it's in D.C. And so let me just step back, okay, and bring this to you as an example. Because this is nuts. Ex-DOJ worker who hurled a Subway sandwich at a federal officer was found not guilty. Not guilty. Sean Dunn struck a U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agent in the chest with a sandwich in Washington in August. He was facing charges of assaulting, resisting, opposing, impeding, intimidating, and interfering with a federal officer. Jurors deliberated for about 7 hours before reaching a verdict. After it was read, Dunn hugged his lawyer in the courtroom and said, "I believe that I was protecting the rights of immigrants by assaulting an officer. And let us not forget that the Great Seal of the United States says, e pluribus unum," Dunn said. That means for many one, every life matters no matter where you come from, no matter how you got here, no matter how you identify. You have a right to live a life that is free. Total bullcrap, insane statement by a woke lefty who was fired from the DOJ, thank God for this incident. But during the trial, Dunn's legal team insisted he threw the sandwich in protest of President Trump's deployment of the National Guard in Washington, D.C., and it was not a violent attack. It wasn't. Dunn's lawyers did not dispute that Dunn threw the sandwich at a CCP officer outside the nightclub, though he insisted it was done as an explanation point. It was done as an explanation point to express his negative feelings about the National Guard's deployment within the Capitol, which, as you all know, has resulted in Washington, D.C. being the safest it has been in like 40 years. Crime is way down. It's safer. It's cleaner. This clown was protesting that because he has Trump derangement syndrome, right? It was a harmless gesture at the end of him exercising his right to speak out, defense attorney Giulio Gatto said during the trial. He is overwhelmingly not guilty. Prosecutors urged that Dunn's political expression doesn't make him immune for prosecution for assaulting the agents. So they're saying free speech means you can throw things at police officers. This is what a jury in Washington, D.C. said. So when I talk about the Comey stuff and things, nothing's for sure. But we're sure glad that some of them are going to be in Florida, where you might actually be able to get some freaking justice. Speaking of which, this is another thing that's going to be important. Representative Brennan Gill files impeachment articles against Judge Boasberg, which we asked, we talked about last week that it was going to happen, so it did happen. Representative Brennan Gill from Texas introduced articles of impeachment against U.S. District Court Judge Jason Boasberg for his role in the Arctic frost scandal. The resolution accused Boasberg of abuse of power, alleging that he compromised judicial impartiality and allowed Biden Department of Justice official Special Counsel Jack Smith to target Republican lawmakers, operatives, and organizations in a politically motivated probe. He said Judge Boasberg has compromised the impartiality of the judiciary and created a constitutional crisis. He's weaponizing his power against political opponents, including Republican members of Congress who are faithfully serving the American people. And I'm proud to once again introduce articles of impeachment and against Judge Boasberg to hold him accountable for these high crimes and misdemeanors. Well, can he get a vote of that in the House? Will Murkowski, Collins, and those guys go along? And then we'll go to the Senate? And if there's not a filibuster destruction where you can vote on 51%, can they get 60 votes? This guy, this radical leftist judge was rebuked by his own court, looked at what he did with the Jack Smith subpoenas and things, and said what he did was illegal. His own court said that. Can we get a Senate conviction for impeachment? That's another reason to get rid of the filibuster, kids. That's another reason. If we don't start to hold these people accountable, we're done. You can't. Our nation, what separates America from the rest of the world? We are not a nation ruled by men, but by law. Mean it. Go look it up. Other countries, that's not the case. If you don't have equal justice under the law, if you don't have the rule of law, which this clown, not a judge, this activist, clearly violated, then you don't have a country at all. Do you see why it's so important to fight and win these fights? It's not optional. We're not the United States if we can impeach this SOB. So now the impeachment, has been filed. Will Speaker Johnson bring it to a vote? Will you engage with your House representatives and say, vote for this? Second ask of the show, call your House members. We want this guy impeached. It's fundamental. It's critical to us. And then Donald Trump said this is critical, and it is. Supreme Court heard oral arguments on Wednesday about the tariffs. President Trump was unequivocal. He described the case as one of the most important decisions in the history of our country. As the outcome, the case will determine whether any U.S. president can wield tariffs as a tool for economic leverage and national security. Other countries use tariffs against us, and we weren't able to openly and freely use tariffs against them, Trump said. I'll give you one example, China. That was going to be a disaster for the world, and I was able to settle it very quickly, very easily, because I was able to use tariffs. Meaning, when he met with Xi in China, they were trying to withhold rare earth minerals. The only way to force them to not do that, not just against the U.S., against all the countries in the world, he was able to use tariffs to bring Xi to the table. Okay? Without that, we're screwed. And the Supreme Court is hearing this. It's total national security and economic health is also part of national security, by the way. If we don't have tariffs, we don't have national security, and the rest of the world would laugh at us because they've used tariffs against us for years and took advantage of us, and we wouldn't be able to do that, right? We wouldn't be able to do that. So it's just a matter of the court making the right decision. We were able to listen. It was really interesting. I did listen for quite a while. It was several hours of debate. And the media kind of played it out as the Supreme Court was dubious of Trump's claim to be able to use tariffs under the current law. But there was clear indications that they weren't just going to say, no, you can't do it at all. There may be some restricting of how to do it, and Trump has other ways to do it. So we'll see how that plays out. But pray on that one, right? Pray that the Supreme Court rules the right way. We need this tool. We need President Trump to have that tool. Because the net of it all is, well, there's all this debate about tariffs or taxes and the American people are paying for them and all that. It's really just a negotiating tool. When it's all said and done, we're not going to be paying higher tariffs. We're just going to be getting better deals from other countries. He needs that tool. Pray on that. Okay? We're talking courts, so I thought I'd throw this one here because this is kind of out of left field and a big win. Whoa. Second Circuit issues stunning decision on Trump's New York criminal cases. Well, what does this mean? Well, as you know, President Trump was unfairly convicted in kangaroo courts in New York State, okay? And during that time, when they were trying to keep him off the ballot and literally put him in prison for life, the Supreme Court made a ruling about presidential immunity. And Trump's team tried to use that to get this case moved to federal court. Well, the Second Circuit of Appeals issued a stunning decision this Thursday, vacating a lower court's ruling that denied President Donald Trump's efforts to remove the New York criminal case against him from state federal court. As you know, we all know, Trump was convicted on 34 counts of falsifying business records in New York, and he was also convicted in the Stormy Daniels adult film star thing. Okay? Those were bogus. But a funny thing happened on the way to the presidency. The Supreme Court issued a ruling on presidential immunity that had far-reaching implications. So the U.S. District Court Judge Alvin Hierstein shut down that renewed effort in September 24 to move it to federal court. But now on Thursday, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, federal court, ruled that they failed to properly consider the motion, and they're saying you've got to go back and look at this. So what does that mean? It means that the district court has to revisit the issue and consider the case should have been removed to the federal court, meaning it was improperly tried in the state court, which could mean that the convictions ultimately don't stand. They could literally vacate all the, he's a convicted felon, bullcrap lies if they rule that it should have been moved to the federal court. That's not a small thing. That's a big thing for Donald Trump. That's a big thing. This was another big thing, okay? Let's see. This is House GOP probes target Soros-linked groups over alleged Antifa funding ties. We've been talking about go after the funders. And the DOJ and the FBI, have been looking into the funders of Antifa and BLM. We've talked about that. So Jim Jordan in the House released a letter they had sent. House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan of Ohio and Subcommittee Constitution Chairman Chip Roy of Texas are demanding nonprofit liberal advocacy groups turn over documents related to alleged support of Antifa as the Trump administration continues to crack down on left-wing militant groups. In the letter obtained by Fox News Digital, the Republican lawmakers called on the Alliance for Global Justice and Open Society Foundation to provide communications, financial records, and internal policies related to nonprofits tied to Refuse Fascism and other groups purportedly tied to Antifa, which President Donald Trump deemed a domestic terrorist organization this year. The letter cites public reporting that the AFJGJ acts as a financial sponsor for Antifa groups and cites donations to Refuse Fascism, a group that was recently present in Washington, D.C., protesting the one-year anniversary of Trump's election victory. We'll see. what this relates to, but we think there's a money trail. Can they get to it, and can we act and act on that, and and start to arrest these people? At least break the chain of funding for these leftist militant groups who want to overthrow the U.S. government. This is how you fight the war. So I wanted to make that, part of what, let's get rid of the filibuster. Let's start enacting laws. But also we've got to, start arresting people. We've got to start convicting people, and we've got to start defunding our enemies. That's part of war. That's how you go forward. This was a good decision that, we would not, you would not be surprised by, but I think that it's important. Supreme Court rules, State Department policy requiring sex on birth at birth. What was your sex at birth on passports? So Trump is trying to dismantle DEI, critical race theory, the whole LGBTQ trans agenda, which is destroying our country, our culture, our families, our government, and everything. So what is this about? The U.S. Supreme Court on November 6 allowed the Trump administration to enforce its policy requiring the sex designation on a U.S. passport to be consistent with the passport holder's sex at birth. This was, again, what the left was doing since 1992 to 2010. Applicants who wanted passports with sex markers that were different from their sex at birth required them to provide evidence of surgical reassignment. Okay, so that was the law until 2010. By 2021, the State Department was just allowing you to just say, I want to be called a female on their passports. Well, passports are supposed to be identification that is verifiable. That was not verifiable. So in January 22nd, right after Trump came back into office, the State Department changed the rules for sex markers on passports, going back to the pre-1992 practices. And of course, they fought it, went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court ruled you can do that. Trump's not just saying things, he's doing things. He's doing things you and I voted for or that are important, okay? Then we got the whole election fraud thing. And Harmeet Dillon, who we've talked about, is a real patriot. She's in the DOJ. She's in the Civil Rights Division, on which the laws concerning elections mostly fall. This is important. DOJ sues 8 states over dirty voter rolls as Harmeet Dillon cracks down. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, announced this week that the Department of Justice has filed lawsuits against multiple states for failing to comply with federal requests to review their voter rolls, part of an effort to ensure that only eligible U.S. citizens are registered to vote. The law says you cannot vote in federal elections if you're not a U.S. citizen. Blue states have done this forever. They've got illegals all over their voter rolls. Here's the proof. Yeah, I'll prove it. We've been asking states to produce the data on their rolls to be able to make sure they only have citizens on them, and they haven't complied. So we have filed 8 lawsuits against throughout the United States to enforce our data requests, which is something they have had to comply with under the Voting Rights Act of 1960. The lawsuits were filed against, California, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, New York, Oregon, and Maine. According to Dillon, these states have not complied with requirements under the National Voter Registration Act, both of which states require states to maintain accurate and up-to-date voter rolls, okay? It's seeking access to the full voter registration data, including names, date of birth, address, state driver's license number, and the last 4 digits of their social security number to determine whether the voters included duplicate registrations of non-citizens. Dillon said the goal is to ensure election integrity for 2026 by confirming that all individuals on state voter rolls are legally eligible to vote. Now, get this. Dillon said her division is now prioritizing voter roll enforcement as a key step in restoring public confidence. In fact, when we started to bring these cases, some of the legacy lawyers in the DOJ Civil Rights Division told us they were unfamiliar with how to do these cases. They've never been done in Civil Rights Division before, so we're proud to bring back these statutes and enforce them. Right? We said our government is corrupt. Our elections are broken. Everything's broken. The Civil Rights Division of the DOJ has never enforced the citizenship law. From the 1960 law, you have to be a citizen until now. How's that make you feel? Makes me feel great about Harmeet Dillon. And full disclosure, your donations to the We the People Convention, we had funded Harmeet Dillon before when she wasn't in the government, when she was fighting the COVID insanity. Okay, we've been with Harmeet for a long, long time. They weren't even trying. Now we're going to try. And guess what? It's the freaking law. They're going to have to give over the voter rolls. And you know what you're going to find out? Millions of people that are on the voter rolls in those blue states will not be on the voter rolls for 2026. Think that might change the outcome? Think that might change the vote? Think that's an important story? You hear that story anywhere else but here? No, I don't think you did. That's why you watch this podcast. That's why you share this podcast, so that you can be informed and you can protect and defend your and our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. More evidence of how corrupt we are. This story came out. FBI held pre-election meeting with Twitter on content moderation days before the 2022 midterms record show. Wow. What an interesting story. Who's this coming from? Another group that we've supported. Tom Fenton and Judicial Watch. Tom Fenton, Judicial Watch was there for us in the darkest day, along with the ACLJ and Judicial Watch, to fight these creeps, these criminals in our government who were attacking individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, attacking me directly and you directly, and trying to put us in prison because we stood up to their tyranny. So this story I felt you need to hear about. Days before the 2022 midterm elections, FBI officials held a meeting with Twitter representatives to discuss the platform's content moderation policies and concerns about Chinese interference, according to heavily redacted emails obtained by Judicial Watch through a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. The meeting, scheduled for November 4th, 2022, occurred just after Elon Musk acquired Twitter on October 27th, and days before the voters cast their ballots on November 8th. The email sent on November 3rd with the subject line, midterm election touch point meeting with Twitter, was addressed to Twitter officials and basically shows that they did meet. They had their thumb on the scale. This is before Musk could fix anything. They were still interfering in 2022. Tom Finn, president of Judicial Watch, condemned the meeting, saying, "This is smoking gun email shows that the Biden FBI were working with big tech to censor Americans just before the key 2022 election." And they were. We got the goods. We need the convictions. In order to get the convictions, we need to impeach the judges who are putting their thumbs on the scale. We're doing all those things. And President Trump and his team deserve all of our respect. But a friend of mine said to me after Tuesday's elections, "You know, Tom, the rabid left, 50% of people said they voted in local elections against Donald Trump, who wasn't on the ballot, right? They're all about anger. The problem we have is complacency. Complacency. It's like Christmas every day. Every day, Donald Trump does things that you voted for and want. We're going to cover some of those in the next half of the podcast. But you can't be complacent. You can't be complacent. And I'm going to talk about why and how important that is to the 2026 election before the end of the podcast. But I hope you're going to take the two actions we asked. You're going to go to war on Republican U.S. senators, and you're going to make them end the filibuster and act on that 2 pages of things like, no mail-in votings, voter ID, reforming immigration, getting rid of all the fraud in SNAP and everything else. if we get rid of the filibuster. You're going to go to war on that, and you're going to call your House members, and you're going to say, we want you to impeach Boasberg. You're going to do that? Those are the first two acts of the show. There may be more before it's over. We're going to take a short break. You can see I've got a bit of a cold. My voice is struggling a little bit. So we're going to take a short break. We'll be back after these messages. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion podcast, and my name is Tom Zabostowski. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. Something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. So if you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday. So if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday. And in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot. All right, and we're back, and we appreciate you being with us. I want to remind you that we are on X, Tom Z, WTPC. We're on X, Getter, Gab, MeWe, Instagram. We're not on TikTok. They threw us off. I don't know what the hell's going on with that. We're on YouTube finally again. And we're getting several thousand views of our podcast every week on that. So welcome to all of you who have joined us from these various things. It's usually Tom Z, WTPC, or it's We the People Convention. I also want to remind you guys that on our podcast page, we've got a new thing. It's not new. We got a thing called the Chapters Player, which we pay a company to do, which takes the podcast and breaks out every story as a separate links. So you got the regular player to watch the whole thing, and then the Chapters Player, which just didn't come out until Sunday. You can just scroll through the stories and just click, and it goes right to that part of the video. Just bang. And then there's a link that starts at that part of the video that if you click on that, it copies a link that you can text to someone or email to someone or put on social media and say, you got to watch this. This is an important story. Okay? So use it to your advantage. That's the whole effort here, is to inform your fellow citizens, to share stories you hear here that they aren't hearing. That's the important thing. Share that video of Senator Kennedy just talking about how stupid the proposal is that the Dems made, because they either want to keep the government shut down or force Trump and the Republicans to do something that will hurt them in the elections next year. Share that. Share that, okay? So we're giving you the tools. Please use them, all right? But most of all, just take action in defense of our freedom and liberty and our prosperity. Call your senators this week and call your House member and say, we want you to get rid of the filibuster and pass the MAGA agenda. That's the message. We cannot relent until that is done. That's the hill we die on right now. We're going to choose the fight. This is the fight President Trump chose. We're going to win it for him. Okay? And then the House, we got to start impeaching these judges, because if we don't, we're never going to have equal justice under the law. We're never going to have our country back. Okay? 2 things. All right. We're going to get into some other things that, again, you won't hear anywhere else, but I think are important. That's why I bring them to your attention. So let's start with this. I thought this was little too late. University leaders say organized networks, including Iran, drove anti-Israel campus interests. Now, when we saw after October 6th, 7th, I guess it was, in 2023, when the Hamas had the ferocious attack on Israel, butchering innocent people, and boom, right away, at Columbia, at all kinds of universities, there's these organized protests that are for Hamas. And we're like, what the hell? What's going on? We knew it was AstroTurf. Those of us in the movement who've seen this before. Here's your proof. Several leaders of prominent universities on Monday said they believe the anti-Israel and anti-Semitic demonstrations that broke out on campuses across the United States during the Jewish state's war against Hamas were not organic, instead telling a panel audience that they believe organized networks and even foreign governments may have driven the unrest. Leaders of notable U.S. universities had not offered many thoughts on the connection between campus protests and outside groups before Monday's discussion. During this event, though, Syracuse University Chancellor Kent Severud brought up Iran in particular. He said, quote, "I really believe the demonstrations were encouraged from Iran." He said, "I did not have the involvement of very many, if any, of our own students. It was outside agitators." Vanderbilt University Chancellor Daniel Dimermeyer agreed, saying that anti-Israeli movement on his campus seemed to have been coordinated by outside forces and followed a playbook that was imported from other universities. Really? Congressional investigators and Congress has investigated the role of outside non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and foreign entities in campus protests, and former Director of National Intelligence R.V. Haynes announced in July of 2024 the Iranian government encouraged the demonstrations and provide financial support. Why did we let them? Why didn't we stop the money? Because we didn't want to. 2024 was Biden. Hamas members themselves have indicated the terror group had worked with U.S. activists. 3 Israelis who had been held captive in Gaza alleged in a May lawsuit that one of their Hamas captors told them that Hamas in Gaza was coordinating with its allies, including its allies in the media and on college campuses, to foment hatred against Israel and Jews. Okay? And so what do we have? with Muslim Mandami, the new mayor of New York City. The day after the election, there's a statement by the anti-Israel forces saying that they demand that New York City stop any funds that go to help Israel, stop any investment in companies that are Israeli companies. It's all anti-Israel. The new mayor of New York is going to stop anything that promotes Jews in Israel. Oh, but he's not a racist or anti-Semite. No. And what, 30% of Jews in New York voted for him? Folks, just wake the hell up. Wake the hell up, okay? And so then this followed, this story kind of relates to that because we should have done this a long time ago. Republicans moved to end tax-exempt status for CAIR, other groups with Islamic terror connections. We've had people in the Tea Party movement, we have been arguing about this and screaming about this for 16 years. And now they're finally going to do something? Representative Chip Roy has introduced legislation that would prevent American taxpayers from inadvertently subsidizing groups with ties to terrorism. Filed on Tuesday, the No Tax Exemption for Terror Act would prevent organizations like the extremist groups such as the Council for American Islamic Relations, CAIR, Council for American Islamic Relations, from obtaining tax-exempt status. It is absurd that the U.S. has provided organizations with ties to terrorism tax-exempt status, resulting in the American people inadvertently subsidizing terrorism against themselves. Oh, you mean like all the USA aid that was funding the open borders, that was funding all the Democrat NGOs that were destroying our country? You mean like that, Chip? You mean like those things that you guys never did a freaking thing to stop? In the 16 years the Tea Party was screaming at the top of our lungs that you should do? Oh, you mean those things? You think that maybe if you put that bill up and we get rid of the filibuster, it could pass in the Senate, become law? You think, Chip? Maybe that's what we should do? Yeah. It's not what we should do, it's what we have to do. And so then, again, sticking more with international news and all that stuff, I keep telling you guys, China is at war with us. I keep providing evidence, and I'm not going to stop. On every podcast, I'm going to just give you a zinger. Here's one. New York laser expert convicted of stealing military secrets for China. A federal grand jury has convicted a New York fiber laser expert of stealing military defense secrets to start a business in China. Ji Wang, 63, faces up to 15 years in prison for economic espionage after pilfering classified research on laser weapons technology. Wang's conviction marks another victory in the federal effort to combat intellectual property theft linked to China's state-sponsored recruitment programs. Wang also stole hundreds of files containing trade secrets from a $11.4 million military project on or around July 1st, 2016. The stolen data included manufacturing technology for specialty optical fiber used in high-powered laser weapons. 2016. It's 2025. He's just been convicted. You know what the most important weapon development in worldwide military right now is? Laser weapons. The replacement for the Golden Dome in Israel is a laser weapon that can shoot down drones and missiles. The Navy, it's all about laser weapons. This guy stole it 9 years ago. We didn't stop him because the Chinese knew we were corrupt and they could abuse us, and they did. And just as a side note, remember the story I told you about a while back that these scientists at the University of Michigan were bringing in biological weapons, basically to make our crops poisonous, that they were going to try to seed American crops and change the biology of the crops so they would be poisonous. Oh yeah, we arrested 3 more University of Michigan professors this week in that same case. Oh yeah, but no, China's our friends. Oh no, they're just an economic rival. We're not at war with China, Tom. You're just nuts. Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so on the China front, I thought this is good news. Appeals court upholds Florida law restricting Chinese communist land purchases. So we all know under Biden, the communist Chinese bought all kinds of land, just happened to be near our military bases. Wow, what a coincidence that is. And no one knew it. Geez, wow. Until we started screaming about it and trying to stop it. And of course, Ron DeSantis in Florida, they lead everybody, they acted. A federal appeals court upheld the Florida law on Tuesday that restricts Chinese nationals and entities affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party from making land purchases in the state of Florida. In a 2-1 ruling, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the group of Chinese nationals challenged parts of the law lacked standing to bring their suit. After careful review and with the benefit of oral argument, we affirm the denial of the plaintiff's preliminary injunction motion as to the registration and affidavit requirements. Basically, they said that people who were fighting this were Chinese Americans mixed in with Chinese nationals. And the court said they don't have standing. So I don't know how this is going to go, but Florida Governor Ron DeSantis reacted positively to the appellate court ruling on Wednesday in a post on X, calling it a great victory for our law keeping the CCP out of Florida. Florida State Attorney General James Utmeyer similarly responded favorably to the news, saying it represents a huge win for the state. I don't know. We'll still see because, many of you know that once we found that they bought all this land around military bases, that's all like under state law, and nobody's been able to just take it back, right? Because property rights are property rights. So this is an ongoing problem. Unless Trump declared like some sort of a national emergency that basically said this was an imminent threat to our defense capabilities and maybe had the federal government seize the land based on that, they've got these properties. And what are they doing? They're keeping track of all of our training flights, how many planes are there, how many soldiers are there, how many missile tests. They're spying on us, and we frickin' let them. It's a disgrace. It's just a disgrace. So I'm going to tell you about, let me go to one more story, and then we'll come back and talk about that. Let me switch these stories. Let me do this first. Talk about a disgrace. Here's a list of delays and waste by defense contractors meeting with Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. Okay? Now, Pete Hegseth called a meeting this week with defense contractors to talk to them about what a mess our military defense contracting is. We spend $1 trillion a year on defense, more than the entire world combined. I've said to you, I believe in my heart, we should cut the defense budget by 40% and we'd have better defense. Well, what do you mean, Tom? How could that be? Well, let me just read this article for you because it really made me angry and ain't going to make you happy. War Secretary Pete Hegseth is set to address a number of top defense companies on Friday to outline potential overhaul to the procurement process amid persistent delays and waste in contract deliveries. The meeting is intended to outline a sweeping set of acquisition reforms to top-level executives at America's top industrial titans such as Lockheed Martin and Raytheon Technologies, among many others. The industry titans have long suffered from delays to delivering on contracts to the Pentagon, often to the tune of hundreds of billions of wasted taxpayer dollars. The core principle of this transformation is simple. Place accountable decision makers as close as possible to program execution, eliminate non-value added layers of bureaucracy, and prioritize flexible trades and timely delivery at the speed of relevance, Hegg said in a memo announcing the meeting. Now, here's your examples. Listen to this. One flagship example remains Lockheed Martin's contract for the F-35 multi-role fighter, which is over budget by $165 billion. Over budget. And a decade late. It's 10 years late in delivery. the Air Force slashed its order of the fighter jets to 48 units, from 48 units to 24, in response to the procurement issues. Boeing's KC-46 Pegasus aerial refueling tanker was also delayed over 8 years to the tune of billions of dollars of overrun costs. Additionally, the company's drone refueling craft, the MQ-25 Stingray, was delayed from 2024. It's not going to be ready until 2027, if then. The Government Accountability Office found in 2025 that Boeing spent nearly $1 billion over 8 years on the Orca extra-large unmanned sea vehicle, despite the program never making it to production. Okay? That's why I've been promoting Anduril, Palmer Luckey. They are the answer. Palmer Luckey, who has got a big plant in Columbus, Ohio, going to be building drones at scale. You got to watch this guy. Go watch YouTube videos. Just look at Palmer Luckey from Anduril. You know what their deal is? They make the things first and then sell them to the military. They use their own money to build these drone submarines that they already built. They built them. And so when the Navy said, yeah, we'll buy these, they're already made. They go into production and they're in the water in months for less. It's a disgrace. And you know why it's a disgrace? Because here's the part that you're not hearing in this, okay? Here's the part you're hearing in this. And that is that these defense contractors are the biggest funders of all these senators and congressmen. That's the bottom line. They've paid for the graft. The defense contractors have made an industry out of not delivering your defense needs. And it's a scandal of the biggest scandal. That's why the Defense Department, the War Department, can't pass a frickin' audit. Okay? So they had the meeting on Friday, and Hegseth read them the Riot Act, and then he had this statement. Speed replaces process, he said. Money follows need. Joint problems drive action. Experimentation accelerates delivery, and the services move faster and smarter. Hegseth said it would take as many as 300 days for new weapons to be delivered to the battlefield under the current system. And by that time, the needs of the warfare have changed, as we saw in Ukraine. And in Ukraine, who is providing the weapons? Anduril, Palmer Luckey. He said, we need acquisition and industry to be as strong and as fast as our war fighters. The warfighting acquisition system will dramatically shorten timelines, improve and expand the defense industrial base, boost competition, empower acquisition officials to take risks and make trade-offs. We are leaving the old failed process behind, and we will instead embrace a new agile and results-oriented approach. From your lips to God's ears, Pete Hegseth. But thank God somebody is standing up for you and I, the taxpayers, because we've been getting ripped off. Ripped off, as President Trump likes to say. They've been ripping us off. Well, now that's got to change. That's great news. Great news. This is an interesting story because we keep talking about President Trump sending troops into these cities and ending crime, but the left doesn't want that. So now we've had this crime in Charlotte, North Carolina, and pressure mounts for Dem governor to call in the National Guard after a bunch of high-profile murders. This is the city where the illegal immigrant stabbed the Ukrainian girl on the train after he'd been convicted 14 times and let out of jail. So what's going on here? Representative Mark Harris, Republican of North Carolina, demanded Wednesday that North Carolina Democratic Governor Josh Stein deploy the National Guard to Charlotte. Harris, along with Republican Representative Pat Harrison and Chuck Edwards, asked Stein in a letter to grant the request of the Fraternal Order of Police to send the National Guard to Charlotte. Until our judicial system ensures criminals are held accountable, there is a compelling case to deter violence through a visible, stabilizing presence such as the National Guard. While calling upon the National Guard is not a long-term solution to Charlotte's law enforcement staffing challenges, it is an emergency measure designed to stabilize a crisis situation and protect innocent lives. The letter said that Charlotte had a streak of 8 murders in 7 days, and the city's downtown area has seen a 200% increase in its murder rate from this time last year. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Fraternal Order of Police said assaults involving knives and guns increased from 86 in 2024 to 111 in 2025, while strong-arm robberies increased from 26 to 32. Governor Stein is deaf to the desperate pleas of the Charlotte police and residents. He refuses to reinforce to crush the violent crime surge, exposing him and his party as pro-crime Democrats who coddle criminals. They want chaos. They don't want to solve the crime. They want crime. They want you afraid. And they want you to think that they're defending you when they're the ones releasing the criminals to prey on you. Good move. Again, President Trump should look to do that. Now, this story, the next 2 stories are about the economy, and they're contradictory, and I had to use an AI to try to explain it to me so I can explain it to you. But here's 2 important stories. Great news from ADP. Private sector hiring increased by 42,000, and there's a question mark after that. So, yeesh, the fact that this is actually good news provides a commentary on the current economic environment that may not be particularly welcome. However, it might explain the across-the-board election results from last night better than some other theories, especially given the earlier polling. Basically, they're referring to the fact that young people's lives aren't getting better. Their jobs aren't coming through yet because it takes time to build these plants that the tariffs are driving. And so a lot of people voted against Republicans because of that. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is shuttered for the moment because the government is shut down. So questions about accuracy and methodology still pending. ADP is about the only national metric to do this. ADP is the ADP's National Employment Report produced by the ADP Research in collaboration with Stanford Digital Labs. What they found was that private sector increased jobs of 42,000 last month, and is an independent measure of the labor market based on anonymized weekly payroll data of more than 26 million private sector employees. Now, what they're saying is that's good that there's 42,000 new jobs, but the bad part is that the population in the United States increases every month, even though illegal immigration and being deported is bringing it down. The fact is that we need like 100 to 125,000 new jobs a month just to keep up with new people, young people moving into the job market. So 42,000 ain't a great number, but it's better than, than nothing, right? It's still growth, and that's important. But then this story comes out, and I'm like, what does this mean? October layoffs reached highest level for the month in 22 years. Okay? Hiring, planned job cuts for October reached the highest level for the month in 22 years and the highest of any month in the fourth quarter since 2008. Layoffs announced in October surged 175% from the same time a year ago to 153,000, according to global outplacement firm Challenger Gray and Christmas. This is also up 183% since September, when U.S.-based employers planned to cut 54,000 jobs. So how can jobs be up 43,000 in October, 42,000 in October on the one report, but then down the lowest, the most in 22 years? Well, the key phrase in this article was planned job cuts. People said, we expect to cut jobs, but they didn't. Instead, there were 42,000 more jobs. The bottom line is, President Trump got the message on Tuesday. Every Republican needs to get the message. We've got to get the economy roaring. We've got to start to lower home costs, food costs. We've got to help the young people find jobs. And it's going to be I told you before, it's going to be a close call because in 2026, lots of good things from the big, beautiful bill, including bigger tax returns, are going to help people, but not till March, April, May. Until then, we're going to have some issues with the job market and the economy. You've got to explain that to people and tell them, hold on, good things are coming, because Trump was handed a mess. A mess. Remember, Biden had inflation at 9%. It's down under 3%. But it takes time to recover because that 9% inflation of your goods that went up, it's still there. The fact that inflation is 3% is 3% from the 9%. Do you see how hard this is? You got to educate people. You got to make sure they understand the things we are doing are going to work. Takes a little time. We ain't got a lot of time because it has to come home by next summer so that we win big in the 2026 midterms. So I want to share that with you. This story is disturbing because it just shows the corruption isn't just at the state, at the federal level. Mississippi law enforcement caught working with Cartel 20 officers indicted for aiding drug smuggling into America. This was really sad to see. Federal prosecutors have announced the indictment and arrest of 20 individuals, most of them sworn law enforcement officers in the Mississippi Delta region, for allegedly conspiring with Mexican drug cartels to smuggle narcotics in the United States. U.S. Attorney Clay Joyner for the Northern District of Mississippi made the announcement on Thursday. Just 1 second here. We are here today to talk about some incredibly serious allegations that mark a monumental betrayal of the public trust. To announce the indictment and arrest of 20 individuals, most of them law enforcement officers in the Mississippi Delta region. The indictments generally allege the taking of bribes and to attempt to aid and abet drug trafficking as well as associated crimes. The announcement details the results of years-long federal investigation and sting operations in the Mississippi Delta region, resulting in indictment of the 20 individuals, including 14 current or former law enforcement officers. They are allegedly accused of, the officers allegedly accepted bribes ranging from $20,000 to $37,000 in exchange for police protection of drug cartel operators. The defendants provide armed escort services for what they believed were large quantities of illegal drugs for people they believed were trafficking drugs. The scheme involved a network of corruption that extended across multiple counties in Mississippi and into Tennessee. So everybody has their price, I guess, but we caught them. Again, we've got to hold law enforcement to the highest standards, and that's what we're doing. So kudos again to the DOJ. Man, how many things are they working on? It's unbelievable. So let's get into some better stuff, okay? Some good news. This is good. Court strikes down Ohio schools' pronoun policy and win for parental rights group. A federal appeals court on Thursday ruled that an Ohio school district violated students' free speech rights by enforcing policies that restricted gender language in classrooms. The 6th U.S. District Court of Appeals said the Olentangy local school district near Columbus, Ohio, cannot punish students for using gender-specific language, even if some find it offensive. Parents Defending Education, a national parental rights organization, sued the district in 2023, arguing its pronouns mandate violates students' First and 14th Amendment rights. District officials maintained the policies were designed to curb bullying and promote inclusion. No, it was there to promote DEI. It was there to promote the trans agenda. In its majority opinion, the court said the district fell far short of showing that it allowed such speech could cause disruption or infringe on others' rights. Our society continues to debate whether biological pronouns are appropriate or offensive. Supreme Court just ruled they're not appropriate on passports. I covered that story in the first half of the podcast. Just as it continues to debate many other issues surrounding transgender rights. There's no such thing as transgenderism at all. There's only gender dysphoria, a mental health issue that makes people think that they're confused about their gender. There is no transgenderism at all. It doesn't exist. In fact, in nature, in law, in biology. And therefore, there are no rights, Circuit Judge Eric Murphy, who wrote for the majority, even though you ruled the right way, there are no transgender rights. Stop it. Good win for us on that court. Why they filed that suit in 2023, this is 2025. That's how much time and effort and money it takes to defend, to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Here's a classic case of why it's so hard. Rhode Island school demands mom cough up $117,000 to see curriculum materials and emails of teacher who celebrated Charlie Kirk's death. $117,000. After a high school teacher in Rhode Island posted a video celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk, a concerned mother requested information about the materials his teacher used in his classroom. In response, school officials demand she pay roughly $117,000 to find out. Benjamin Philo, as a social studies teacher at Barrington High School, came under fire for posting multiple videos on social media demeaning Kirk shortly after his assassination. The saga began when Nicole Solis discovered these videos. Nicole, a woman's mother, according to the Goldwater Institute, a public policy and litigation group involved in the case. She submitted a public records request to the Barrington Public Schools asking for the curriculum materials and any email correspondence containing the word Trump between September 2024 and the date of her request. A second request, she also asked for emails recordings, any emails records containing the word Trump dating back to 2016. To provide all the requested emails and curriculum materials, the school board claimed it would take 7,735 hours to find the materials and would cost $117,000. What a bunch of bullcrap, okay? So they eventually, the interim superintendent, because the former superintendent probably was fired for this fiasco, told Fox News that since the first request, recognizing the cost was high, we suggested to the requesters they narrow the scope of the request and that they did so, it could be roughly reduced to $5,500. But one of Barrington's mothers said taxpayers have a right to this information, should be readily available, and should cost nothing. The bottom line is they put that price on it to keep it secret, and they should be found guilty, and they should have to pay that mother who asked for it penalties for delaying the request. That's what the court should decide. But that's the fight we have to fight, and congratulations for them for fighting to fight that. Okay, got a few more stories here before we wrap up the podcast. And, generally on the good side, some interesting things. This one you may have heard, Trump announces lower prices on Medicare drug coverage for most popular weight loss drugs. Now, I had told you that premiums for healthcare are soaring because of the requests for these weight loss drugs. So President Trump announced, an agreement. President Trump announced a deal Thursday, November 6th, with drug makers Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk to cut prices of their popular weight loss drugs and expand Medicaid coverage of those medications. Now, we talked to you guys about the fact that these drugs are made by these European companies, and the biggest gold mine is to get them covered by Medicare. And now you have it. And I'm against this. But anyway, the negotiated deal will allow Medicare and Medicaid coverage for Lilly's Zepbound and Novo's Wegovy, and consumers will be able to purchase drugs at discounted prices through the federal government's direct-to-consumer website, Trump RX, which will be launched next year. For years, politicians have talked about making healthcare affordable. Trump said from the Oval Office, but my administration is actively doing it. The least expensive drug, priced $149 per month, will apply to yet-to-launch oral version of these weight loss drugs. Lilly has sought prior Food and Drug Administration review of its oral drug called Orforglipron. The drug will sell injectable versions of these medications for an average of $350 per month. $350 per month. A price that drug makers will reduce by about $250 in the next 24 months. I think this whole plan stinks. I think it's just the drug industry abusing our government healthcare system, Obamacare. I think President Trump is missing the boat on this. And listen, $350 a month for drugs that make you lose weight, which we still don't know what the long-term effect of that will be on your body. These are powerful drugs. When I had my heart attack in May of 2024, and I got the religion, man, I knew I had to lose weight. I've lost 50 pounds. You know, I did that by switching to a vegan diet, cutting my calories below 1,500 a day, and working out 3 days a week. I've lost 50 pounds. I feel better than I've ever felt. And I haven't been in the hospital this year. Yay. Now, I'm not saying everyone can do it, but here's the bottom line. The government makes us sick by the pills that we take, and they make us fat because of the lack of regulation of the food we eat. And then they're going to pay the same people who do that to us to give us a pill to make us thinner. Wow. Tell me what's wrong with that. Write to me. Tom Z, info at We the People Convention. Right? Write to me. Tell me. President Trump, I get it. You're trying to send a message. You're helping. You're fighting for us. You are fighting for us. But boy, I still think we're going in the wrong direction on the drug thing. We need less medicine, not more. We need better nutrition. Call me Maha. This story will upset some of you, but I think it's rational. Elon Musk's pay package approved. Tesla shareholders green light up to $1 trillion in compensation for Elon Musk as the CEO of Tesla. Why it matters. Tesla chair Robin Denholm had warned that Musk could leave the company, could leave Tesla if shareholders rejected the compensation plan, while critics said it was exorbitant and unnecessary. Tesla disclosed Thursday during its annual meeting that stockholders have signed off on a pay package worth up to nearly $1 trillion, which ties Musk's compensation to ambitious growth targets. More than 75% backed the deal. I would like to give a heartfelt thanks to everyone who supported the shareholder votes, Musk said. I super appreciate it, is only he can say. The new package lays out a series of milestones to hit. Notably, Musk doesn't have to pay himself. The shareholders ain't going to pay Musk crap. The only way Musk gets $1 trillion is if the Musk Tesla's market capitalization, if the company's value is $8.5 trillion by 2035. By 2035. So Musk is going to earn it, or he's not going to get it. A lot of people are saying, oh, nobody's worth $1 trillion, and I get it. But if you believe in capitalism, and we don't have capitalism anymore, we have crony capitalism, right? Because we have no antitrust. But if you believe in capitalism, if you're the one that makes it, you should get paid for it. If he makes Tesla an $8.5 trillion company and he gets $1 trillion of that, right? That's like 12%. Do you think that's unfair? I don't. So we'll see what happens. A lot of people were talking about that this week. Here's a story that many of you older folks in the show will watch. Will watch the show. Will relate to. Farmer's Almanac to cease publication after 208 years. And I was sad to see this. The 208-year-old publication that farmers, gardeners, and others keen to predict the weather have relied on for guidance will be published for the final time. Farmer's Almanac said Thursday that its 2026 edition will be its last, citing the growing financial challenges of producing and distributing the book in today's chaotic media environment. Access to the online version will cease next month. The Maine-based publication, not to be confused with the even older Farmer's Almanac in neighboring New Hampshire, was first printed in 1818. For centuries, it used a secret formula based on sunspots, planetary positions, and lunar cycles to generate long-range weather forecasts. The almanac also contained gardening tips, trivia, jokes, and natural remedies, but its weather forecast made the most headlines. It is with a heavy heart that we share the end of what has not only been an annual tradition in millions of homes and hearths for hundreds of years, but also a way of life, an inspiration for many who realize the wisdoms of generation past is the key to the generations of the future, the editor said in a statement. So we're sorry to see that go. I've enjoyed the Farmer's Almanac. Many of you have as well. Particularly, I enjoyed the jokes and the stories that were in it. So that's the passing of something that's 200 years old as the world changes. And it's too bad that the digital version is being discontinued. You'd think that would be even easier with AI, but we'll see. Here's another good story, I think. Thanksgiving costs are down under Trump. Okay, so we're coming on Thanksgiving, and President Trump said, from the Oval Office that he is making good on his pledge to drive down costs for American families this holiday season, with a traditional Thanksgiving dinner running about 3% less expensive than in 2024. The savings span a range of essential items with notable drops, including a 22% reduction in dinner rolls and a 15% decrease in frozen vegetables. Other staples such as turkey, stuffing, gravy mixes, cranberries, pumpkin pies are also seeing lower price tags across the board. Major retailers are amplifying the affordability, with Walmart, for instance, saying a full meal for 10 people is now 25% cheaper than last year, featuring the chain's lowest turkey price since 2019 and totaling under $4 per serving. So they're saying the price for Thanksgiving is $4 per serving if you go to Walmart. I don't know this company. Lidl's equivalent spread to 10 people has reduced its costs by $10, now landing at $3.60 per person. Aldi, I'm familiar with Aldi, reports a $7 drop in its 10-person meal, the cheapest since 2019, $4 per head. Okay? So there is some lower cost. However, this is what I like about X and Grok and Consumer Notes, because I reposted this story and said, hey, it's a good thing. Costs are down 25%. Community Notes had this. Missing context. The 2025 Walmart Thanksgiving meal contains 15 items, while the 2024 meal contained 21 items. Additionally, most of the brand name items in the 2024 meal were replaced with great value items the Walmart banned. And then there are links to the 2024 list and the 2025 list, and you can see it's not apples to apples. I don't appreciate that. I don't want to be misled. You come here for the truth. So the fact of the matter is, prices for Thanksgiving dinner probably aren't down. And until we get them down, we're going to struggle. Okay? And I've talked about that throughout this podcast. We've got to make big changes. It's the economy, stupid, before next year's election. Okay, we're going to wrap up the podcast with a couple more things. The Fox News has this Patriots Awards, which was on their pay thing, their Fox Nation pay channel. But I was happy to see that they honored First Lady Melania Trump and Erika Trump. And, Erika received the inaugural Charlie Kirk Legacy Award, which I think is going to be, continued going forward, which I think is another great way to remember Charlie Kirk. And we're glad of that. I was glad to see Melania Trump getting recognized, because the way that person has been treated is really disgraceful. She's been a terrific first lady. Man, talk about standing next to your man and staying with him through thick and thin. Wow. How horrible has it been to be Melania Trump? Your husband's almost shot on live TV. The threats to everyone you know. So I was happy to see that. And that was really good news. And so we continue in every podcast. We will honor Charlie Kirk. We will never forget. We will fight to fulfill his mission by completing America's spiritual revival. Because that's just what it takes. You know and I know. We cannot have the United States of America as it was founded if we do not become a religious and moral people. It's just that simple. And so we're going to keep fighting for that. That's the goal. That's the goal. And so how do you do that? Well, tell people about this podcast. Act on what we talked about in this podcast. Educate your fellow citizens and get them to act as well. If there was something in this podcast you disagree with, write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org. info@wethepeopleconvention.org. If you have story ideas or things that we missed that people need to know, send them to us. We read your emails. We will respond to them. But mostly act. Call your senators and demand they get rid of the filibuster and that they act on these 2 pages of things that we can do to pass legislation to implement the Make America Great Again agenda and finally and totally defeat the left. Okay? And then call your House members and demand that they impeach Boasberg. Because we've got to restore equal justice under the law. 2 big asks this week. 2 big asks. I hope you will take action for them. Now I want to say one last thing about what the elections meant on Tuesday and what's going to happen in 2026. I talked to you about complacency. The big question is, will Trump voters turn out without Trump on the ballot? The evidence is pretty clearly they won't. If they don't, folks, we're done. We're done. I'm worrying right now about how we're going to turn out Trump voters next November here in Ohio and in your state. I think there's only one answer to that question. The left is going to turn out because they're angry. They're rabid dogs. They're going to turn out because they hate Trump and they hate America and they love the Muslim Mandami. That's going to take its course. They have no chance of defeating us next year. If Christians turn out, right? If young people who believe in Charlie Kirk's vision turn out, if Erika Kirk can turn young women, 81% of young women voted against us in the Tuesday's elections. 81%. And that is not going to happen in Mississippi. That's not going to happen in Oklahoma. That may happen in Virginia and New Jersey. But here's what I think is the truth. I think the only way that we get our people to turn out a year from now is if they sincerely believe that if we lose the House, that President Trump will be impeached immediately and they will continue the reign of terror that they used against him and his family and his supporters and us starting in 2016. I do believe that none of us want that ever to happen again. And that we will be mad enough to turn out in droves and to not just hold the House, but to increase our House membership and to increase our Senate membership to make sure that President Trump is never subjected to such injustice again. Next week, I'll get Eric Swalwell. I'll get some of the Democrats who have said, when we get in power again, we're coming for you. Don't worry, we'll be in power again sometime, and we're going to do to you what you're doing to Comey and Brennan and Strzok and Page. Oh, you mean the things you already did to us? You hypocrite liars, sons of guns. The goal is simple, folks. We need to end the filibuster, pass all the laws we need to shore up our nation and cut out all the theft and corruption in our elections and in our government and our economy so that the left never, ever is in power again, ever. Something else will come out. The Democratic Party doesn't exist. They're the Communist Party USA. They're going to go away. There will be another party rise up because we know one thing damn clear. The last thing you want is for Republicans to have total control. You want to have tyranny. Do that. We've seen that in Ohio, let me tell you. Something else will rise up. Something better, I hope. But it's not going to be the Democratic Party. That's the way I see this playing out. And we better hold serve in a year. Or we're done. We're done. Your individual freedom and liberty is done. Mark my words. Okay? So have a good week. Thanks for watching our podcast. Share it. Talk about it. Write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org. But be a happy warrior and act. Defend your nation. Defend your freedom and liberty. Speak up against anyone that threatens you. We're all in this together. We, the people, must defend our nation. Not just Donald Trump, not just Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, not just Pete Hegseth. We, the people, must defend our nation. We must make America great again. Okay? Let's do it. Let's have a good week of doing that. All right? I'll be back again next week. You've been watching the We the People Convention News and Opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. May God bless you, because God has already blessed America, and may he continue to do so. God bless all of you. See you next week.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight.